2023. Here we are. And we have a lovely guest today. We are being joined by Serena Holmes. We're going to learn more about Serena in a little bit. But we want to welcome all of you to Kick-Ass Conversations with Louise and Kim here, starting off a brand new year, a brand new month. I don't know. It's like, here we are. I have all sorts of feelings. What are we celebrating this week? My friends, what are we celebrating?
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Serena.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess for me, I'm celebrating work-life balance. I sold my business last February, so we're just coming up to a year since all of that kind of happened. And every time I see emails kind of pulling through with quote requests, I'm like, I don't have to deal with that. So I think for me, I'm definitely celebrating like a more calm, like work-life balance in this past year.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think my celebration is a little similar. It's like this like kind of a slow ease into 2023, which I can really appreciate because it's like we're talking about, right? Like it's this weird kind of week. Is it a work week? Is it a holiday week? And so just really kind of, for me, I'm celebrating like just that slowness and not having to like rush into something by making a terrible plan, or right. It just feels to me a little bit more slow. I feel a little laid back, to be honest, that, I've got time to figure things out. I don't have all the answers, right at the beginning of the year. And so it's okay to take some time to think about what it is. And I've spent a lot of time this last week reflecting, which has been really interesting, right? That's what I think a new year is all about, is not necessarily about where we headed. It's about where we've been, right? And finding those gems and finding those things that are working, finding those things that aren't working. And then just taking the time to sit with it and say, what am I going to take forward? And what am I going to leave behind?
I love that. And I love that. So I'm going to share that I'm celebrating much the same thing. We are here with we have both Mercury and Mars in retrograde. We have the lunar
Mercury,
right?
Tell ya.
The lunar new year doesn't actually start until January 22nd. So like this energy isn't of, just because we changed the Gregorian calendar doesn't mean that our bodies, our minds, our energy is actually ready to step into this new year. And the way the timing was on kind of the break schedules for kiddos and where the holidays all broke into it, I kind of felt like for me, well, and I have a major event happening next week. Our daughter's bat mitzvah is happening next Saturday. So there's all this energy of I need to get it done. And then I'm like, no, but I don't. But I don't. Like I have time. Exactly. I have time. And that, the universe, planets, whatever, I'm being supported by that, in that energy of it's okay to slow down. And it's okay to step into this new year at whatever pace is going to be needed. Just because just the Gregorian calendar got flipped doesn't mean we're like, oh my God, all the goals have to happen right now. And if I get one more of those emails, I seriously am going to start responding to them and be like, stop mansplaining what we're supposed to do. All right. Well, we are so excited, Serena, to have you here. I know we had a chance to chat with you a little bit before we started, but I'm going to let people know kind of who you are, and then I'll let you share for yourself. So prior to becoming a realtor and a real estate investor, correct? Okay. Serena ran her own multi-award winning brand experience agency called Tigris Events for close to Tigris. I'm so sorry. Tigris Events. Okay. We'll use a different accent, but Tigris Events. I'm from the States. I get things wrong. Okay. For close to 18 years. Under her leadership, she grew the agency to 10 full-time staff and over 2,200 part-time staff all across the country, and the country being Canada, which is a really big freaking country for those of us in the United States. Serena is now a realtor and real estate investor. And in October of 21, she published a book called The Accidental Entrepreneur. It chronicles how she went from a troubled childhood to a self-styled, multifaceted entrepreneurship in the hopes of helping others who may face similar challenges, either personally or professionally. It sounds like a great book, by the way. She is passionate about her family, traveling, health and fitness, wildlife, and sustainability. Oh, I love it. Serena, we're so glad you're here. Louise, do you want to ask the winning question that we always love to ask our guests?
Well, I want to know more about you and your career journey. It sounds like a crayon and a piece of paper, and like, how did you get from like there to here? Because it just sounds so fascinating. And then to chronicle a book to talk about your journey, I love that too.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely crazy. I think that, just my family life alone was always so crazy growing up that people were always like, you're going to have to write a book about this one day. And I think it honestly just planted the seed when I was so young that in itself probably could have been a book. And in fact, when I went to a writing retreat, the woman that I was learning under was like, well, you can't put these things together. Like, it can't be a memoir and a business book. And I was like, well, you can't really have one without the other. It's like hearing Tony Robbins' story. Like, he is who he is because he had that troubled childhood. Like, he had the issues with an abusive parent. And, I went through a lot of things with my parents splitting when I was very young. My older brother died a year later in a really tragic accident. And then, went back and forth among like my family, from like my dad to my mom to my aunt and uncle, and, bounced around a lot. And I think what I learned was that I just couldn't necessarily depend on anyone for my future. Like, I did have a roof over my head, food in the fridge. Like, it wasn't that kind of struggle, but emotionally, when it came time to figure out school and paying for things, like, I knew that I couldn't necessarily depend on someone for those kinds of things. So I was out there trying to get a job when I was 12 years old. I was, by the time I was in university, I had 3 jobs, and that's what really led into my industry and events that I was, someone referred me into it. One thing leads to another. And I met the woman that I ended up partnering with down the road by working part-time as a brand ambassador. She brought me in as a manager 2 weeks into the business really starting, offered me partnership. And I was like, no, like, I'm going to be a journalist. That in itself, I was like, didn't realize it'd be so challenging. So I ended up taking partnership about 6 months later. And then she left the company 4 years in very unexpectedly. So I was at a crossroads where I had to decide, do we walk away, like split what's in the bank and we go our separate ways? Do I buy her out, which is in the middle of the 2008 recession? Do I partner with someone? And ultimately I took the risk. So I bought her out, took a couple of years, and then I ran the business for an additional 14 years.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And then, so how did you then translate that into real estate and real estate investing?
Yeah, so I had been winging it really for the first 8 years. And we were in a situation where we lost our biggest client, which is a huge telecom company. And I was like, what, there's a lot I'm sure I don't know. So I started interviewing different coaches, and I hired a business coach for $1,200 a month for 2 meetings. And 2 of her biggest takeaways were to start really looking at our numbers and create a dashboard. And then the other thing was to put some of our retained earnings to use. So she's like, most businesses operate on 3 months of operating costs. You have like 18 months. But I always looked at it like, no matter what, we can always pay for things. Like, some clients take a long time to pay, and, at least we're always okay. And she's like, well, maybe leave yourself 6 months. And she really encouraged me to put that money to use. So I bought a rental property in Florida, actually. And that was my first, real estate investment outside of my primary residence. And I ended up doubling that investment in about 4 years. Took about a year off to try to decide what to do next, and then found an organization that teaches all different kinds of real estate investing strategies. Bought 2 more pre-construction properties, got heavily into private lending and land development and supporting other things there. So it just, one thing led to another, and I started developing, forms of passive income. And then the year that I was pregnant with my daughter, I was actually able to cut my pay in half from the business based on all the passive income that I had. And then COVID happened. So I stopped taking money from the business altogether, and I was able to ramp up all of the different investments that I had to the point that I've been living off them pretty much for the past 4.5 years. So, I was just able to diversify, and, it just balloons as soon as you start meeting people and networking with different people. Like, now it just feels like this endless stream of opportunities. If I could invest in all of them, I would. But just one thing kind of spiraled and led to another. So
That's so phenomenal.
What do you love about what you do?
Well, I ended up signing up for a real estate license, I guess, 3 months after COVID started, because I was like, well, who knows how long this is going to go on for? Like, will there be a business to come back to at this point, right? Like, nobody knew what the future held. But I think what I've always loved is just helping people. So whether it was, planning an event or staffing it, I think it's knowing that you're helping people meet their goals. I'm providing work opportunities for literally thousands of young people, oftentimes in university, but some stayed with us for, 10 years at a time. So it could be work that they do on the weekend. So we're always providing these situations and opportunities to like help people. And then on this side, when you're working in real estate, like that's one of the biggest decisions that you'll ever make. So you're literally helping people with one of the biggest things they'll ever do in their entire lives. And then through that, I've been able to talk about some of the investing that I've done, and things that they could take advantage of to help like supplement their income. Or for some people that are seniors, they are on a fixed income. So how can they also, leverage what they have in real estate to bring in some passive income and stuff like that. So it's been really nice to be able to just, pass along some of the wisdoms and learning that I have had, and just help people in different ways.
That's fantastic. What have been some of the biggest challenges you've had as you've kind of weaved in and out of these different parts of your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as we were growing, like you're always in this point of like, okay, well, we have all this business, now we got to hire, and then all of a sudden, like you hire all these people, and then you need more business, and there's all those ebbs and flows and stuff like that. We were on a pretty solid trajectory from 2014 onwards, but there were still times where it's like you're booking big business, but then the margins are a bit lower and things like that. So I think it's always just that balancing act, trying to make sure that you can cover things off. Dealing with people is always challenging. So it felt like as we grew, it's not that there was necessarily more situations on average, but, the bigger you get, like there's going to be more things to deal with. So I think that's always been an ongoing challenge. And I think now that I've started a new career, it's almost like you're starting over. So what I found really interesting is that people almost disregard the fact that you ran your own business for 20 years. It's like, oh, you're a new realtor? Like you don't have the numbers and statistics to say like, well, I haven't sold as many houses as the person that's been doing this for 10 years. But you have all of these other things that are very complementary. And honestly, like planning to list a property is very similar to planning an event, like how you set up your suppliers and your deadlines. And, obviously you need to know your paperwork, and there's some different things about it. But I found that that's maybe been a little bit harder than I would have expected, that people kind of look at it like I'm just coming out of university or something like that. So just starting completely from scratch is a bit of a weird situation to be in.
Yeah, like I think a lot of because I talk to a lot of career pivoters, right? And that is an obstacle. It's a barrier often to like how do you know what you're doing, right? Like you can see the parallels. You can see that those tools in your toolbox that you had from, previous lives, previous careers, like they all come with you. It's not like we empty out our toolbox every time. And yet there's that perception that you have started over, but you haven't. It's not, you didn't start from the bottom. You might not have the numbers that support your experience, but you started, when you jump ladders, you jump ladders. You don't climb down and then climb back up, right? You jump across. Yeah.
So it's been interesting. I would say it necessarily always matters, but sometimes if people were to say, well, how many listings do you have right now? Or, tell me about all the other houses you've sold this year. Like you're obviously coming in from a different spot. So you just try to, position yourself in a certain way and focus on the positives and stuff like that. So I think I had a decent first year. I think I was very protective of my time. It was the first time in 20 years I haven't had events to worry about during the summer. So as I got closer to last summer, I was like, you know what? My daughter's only going to be young once. I'm just going to like take this time with her because we're never going to have this time again, So I was very grateful to have had the experience that I've had. And then now that it's New Year, it's kind of like time to pick up and get things going again.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting because I went from, I've done a lot of career pivots. The big one that people were like, wait, what? And they're sitting there scratching their head was I went from being an attorney to being a nonprofit executive, specifically on the fundraising side. People are like, why would you do that? Like, there's a lot of reasons. And well, the thing that always fascinated me was this idea that being an attorney and having certain knowledge made me knowledgeable in everything that a nonprofit could need. And I learned fairly quickly that I did know more than I expected that I knew, but it was again, that thing. It's like they looked at me one way and they couldn't see me in this other way. So they didn't see me as a strategic thinker. They saw me as a legal thinker. Right. And I'm like, well, no, but I'm both. yes, I can look at something and understand the legalities of it and go through it that way, but I can also do this other type of strategic thinking that is in support here. So it is interesting because we can learn skills. We
And they're
can't learn
transferable in most cases.
right? And we
Yep.
can't learn experience. And what we take with us is the experience, and we get to then create this new knowledge base of our skills each time we change.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So for where I went in my mind as I started thinking about that, and with what we're talking about today about authenticity, it's how do you authentically start to think about making shifts if that's what interests you, whether it's to a new role or to a completely new industry. Like, how do you show up as authentically you in these different situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really a lot about alignment. So when I think back to running my own business, there's a lot of things that were nice. Like, I really love the fact that, like, I love the office that we kind of developed for ourselves. And that was one thing, even after COVID started, I go there a couple mornings a week to study. And it's like, oh, I just, it was really hard to kind of walk away from that because it was like the testament to everything that you had built. And it was such an attachment to my identity in some ways, like in many, it's just people looked at you in that way, right? But at the same time, it's very stressful. Like, at the end of the day, if something's gone wrong with an event, like if someone has canceled in the middle of the night or in the morning, or if they've done something stupid while they're on site, like, it's always going to come back to you as the business owner. And I found it just crazy, the timelines that people wanted things on. Like, the more time passed, the crazier those timelines got. So it was very, very stressful, and it was very hard to have a really solid work-life balance, even as I developed my team and I had people to delegate to. And, I was able to, go on holidays without completely melting down or something like that. But at the same time, it's like, I'd never really gone on holidays without my laptop. You're never 100% disconnected. You're always checking your phone. And even now, people are like, oh, you reply so quickly. And it's just habitual at this point, having had my own business for 20 years, that we landed a lot of business by being first in line to get a quote and by being like having that sense of urgency. And I feel like it was hard to just calm down, I guess. So now it's like, for the first time in my life, I feel like that is more balanced. And even taking on real estate clients, it's not like someone's going to call you at 10 o'clock at night and be like, I have to sell my house tomorrow. Like, the way that they would ask for stuff when it came to events and stuff like that, right? That people call us on hours notice. So I think you can really plan around things a lot more effectively. And it could still be a little rushed in some ways, but it's not like it's totally compromising everything. And, now that I have a small child, I'm far more protective of my time. So I think that, COVID was like a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways, that it gave me time with her that I never would have had. But I feel like all of that just played into like this authentic part of myself I never even knew existed. And I almost had to like pull out of the woodwork or something, Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is learn through each of these phases is you're learning who you authentically are, and that can change with time.
Absolutely.
And with
the seasons of your life almost, right? Like,
exactly.
what's acceptable to you now could be very different from what it would have been 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right?
Yeah. It's not like we are born and here we go. This is who you are for the rest of your life. And you can't ever change that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that alignment piece, like that falls into like our values, because our values change throughout our lives. So of course we change, right? And then finding ways to express that, right? That's what really we're talking about being authentic is like, you are not just living your values, but you're expressing your values in a way, but like you said, that word alignment, right? The inside aligns with the outside. And you're able to really step into that.
Yeah. I even shared a post on social recently when it came time to New Year's to say, I can look back at last year and say I actually didn't achieve the goals that I set out for myself for this year when it came time to like look at, say, how many sales I had or this or that, but I got something so much more. And that was honestly like having that time with my family. And, it's just, you can't even put a price tag on that per se, but it was just really interesting. Like, looking back on the year, I was kind of like, well, yeah, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, and I'll get to this. But I was like, I have the whole rest of my life and the whole rest of my career to do all of these things. But, this time is only going to be here for a very, very short period. So I think it's just being true to yourself, and that has to make sense for business, but it also has to make sense for you personally.
Right. Well, and to be able to do that, it's, and we talked about this at the beginning for all three of us, is to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
to not be an autopilot, right?
Yeah.
To not constantly be going without actually understanding what even path you're on. So
Mm-hmm.
slowing down, understanding where you're headed.
Yeah.
So that way, if you want to make a course correction, you can.
Yeah.
So and therefore show up in the world the way that, in alignment with your values, in alignment with what I call my devotions. Like, what is the most important thing to me in my life, things to me in my life,
Yeah.
and how do those things align with this? So, but I can't tell when I'm on autopilot and time is just slipping away.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was honestly, it wasn't always easy because I feel like I've always been so used to go, go, go.
Mhm.
It really almost took like this concerted effort to be like, okay, I'm not going to do some of these things. It's not like I shut it off completely, but I really had to just consciously be like, okay, I'm going to dial it back for this period of time and stuff like that. Cause my mind is always like very, very busy and stuff like that. And I think, thankfully the decisions that I made from an investment perspective have given me that chance to do that, because had I not done all these things, I would have been far more worried about work and, bringing in money in that capacity. But, I was able to support my life in other ways. So it gave me that freedom to do so.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes, like this whole idea of being authentic, I hear this often where it's like, I can't be authentic, right? Like I just can't. Well, people should on themselves, right? But I should be doing this. I need to appear this way. I need to show up in this manner. I need, right? And we kind of get trapped in this place where we feel like we can't have our insides displayed on the outside. No one would understand, or I can't be authentic in this business,
Mm-hmm.
because that just wouldn't fly.
Yeah.
So I want to hear, Serena, a little bit about, like, has that come up for you where you feel like it's a crunchy time where I can't really live into my authenticity because maybe the world sees it a little bit differently?
Yeah. Yeah. I think as a business owner, I felt like that, honestly, most often with my employees, because
Mhm.
it sounds weird, but as close as you can ever get to them, it always felt like me against them. I know it sounds really horrible, but oftentimes, even say, for example, someone's going to quit, like it felt like everyone knew it, months or weeks before I knew. But when it came to how I was, it just felt like sometimes, like if I was going to go on holidays, like, oh, how are they going to look at this? I'm spending money doing this, so they'll think I have all this money. And the reality was,
Mhm.
I actually used travel points to cover most of our holidays, like sometimes 90% of the cost of a holiday. So yes, it could look like, oh, I'm going away again, but I'm covering that cost with points. I'm being strategic with it. I'm also bringing my laptop. It's unusual that I would ever go a day without working when I'm on holidays. And in fact, sometimes my husband would be like, your laptop's like a magnet. Like we'd come in and I'd immediately sit down for 2 hours. So it's not like when they're on holidays and they're off for like a week straight or 2 weeks straight, right? So I often felt like I was worried about the optics of things that I was doing, whether I was buying a new house or we were renovating, or the time that we were spending. Like we had a cottage to go to, but it was my mother-in-law's cottage, it wasn't ours. But I feel like I was always worried about maybe how they perceived things. Just sounds a little strange maybe, but I felt like I was always very careful about certain things or the way that I'd say certain things, because I just, I feel like I never wanted to rock the boat with them and stuff like that. I feel like with a lot of clients I could be more open, but now it's almost like for the first time in this last year, like I have been on a lot of podcasts. I'm talking to people about all these different opportunities that the mainstream person probably has no idea about. And it's just something that it's helped me and it's changed my life to the point like I feel like I have to talk about it. But it's like for the first time I don't have to worry about what maybe like someone working for me might think. You know what I mean? So I'm able to talk more openly about these opportunities and things that are kind of going on and things that I'm passionate about and invested in, and things like that.
Yeah. Well, it seems to just create a lot more flow and ease,
Mhm.
right? When you are able to just like not worry about the optics, like you said. I love that because we can get trapped in that, right? Like that perception, what we need to be putting out. And really, it's not about that. It's about something different. And the more authentic, and I've seen this so often in the leaders that I coach, is actually the more authentic they are, the more transparent they can be about who they are and how they show up.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of things just seem to like ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
Your influence, your impact. all of that starts to change. Your confidence and how people start to see you. And it's not like, hey, who's this, right, crazy person, or what is she up to? But
Yeah.
it's more about like, holy smokes, like that person does that, and meanwhile does all of these things too, or right. And so it does become it can become a balancing act. But I think once you kind of like just not worry so much about what others are perceiving, that's a story that we just get caught up in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's
Well,
natural to feel like that.
absolutely. Well, and because we forget that the other person we're talking to, or the entire team that is reporting to us, they forget we are, and we forget they are humans, and we're all in this human experience together. Right. And it is so hard. I primarily work with entrepreneurs, business owners.
Yeah.
There is that fear of, well, if I show up fully as me, they're not going to see me as the leader that I am.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, but they will.
Yeah.
They'll just see a different side of you as a leader.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I love that idea of transparency. And I just want to add that word vulnerability in there as well, because it can feel very vulnerable to bring ourselves fully to the table.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have to bring all of our baggage with us, but we can definitely be more vulnerable with our team members, with our bosses, with the people that we're working with.
Yeah.
And I think that aids in our authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I mean, when I had my team, I would establish like one-on-one meetings with them every week. And sometimes I just wanted it to be like that opportunity that if there was anything on their mind or something they wanted to talk about, whether it's to do with business or personal, whatever it may be. And oftentimes I found that they just weren't willing to talk about anything. So then I started setting up questions and trying to put themes around it. And even then I felt like it was like pulling teeth sometimes, like maybe that they felt like they couldn't or they shouldn't. And sometimes they could even say something in a meeting, and then 3 days later, something totally different comes about or contradicts like what they've said in that meeting. So I found that, I did try, it could have been the age group of people that I had working with me. They're all primarily in their, mid to late 20s, early 30s and stuff like that at the time. And, I did think that was important to try to build rapport and get to the heart of like what they really wanted in their career and like what they wanted to be doing and things like that. But I found it to be a struggle. So I think it could be on both sides. But so it's not for lack of trying. Like I did try. But
yeah, well, and I think you bring up a really good point, because right, when we are in a leadership capacity, and even if we're not, how do we help others bring their most authentic self forward? How do we show them that there's safety in that?
Yeah.
Because I think that safety is key here. Because if we fear that, oh, if you know that I like playing Dungeons and Dragons, or if you know that, right, I go out to the clubs every night, or if you know that my spouse and I are having problems, or if you know that I'm bankrupt, like whatever those things are that they're afraid to bring to the table, or that I feel like an imposter in my job. Like that's a huge one, is you can't even know that I feel like an imposter doing what I'm being paid to do.
Well, I mean, I even felt like the imposter. And the funny thing is, when we were starting in the business, we were so young that we actually gave ourselves like account manager titles, like on our business cards and stuff like that. Eventually it became like account director. And one of my mentors I had along the way is like, why do you have an account director title like on your business card? Like at this point we were 10 years into it. And he's like, you should have like president or CEO or something. But because I was so young, I just always felt like, yes, I am. But no one's going to take me seriously if I walk into this meeting, if I have that. So it's almost better to walk in as an account manager, and they think we're part of this bigger organization. And, that was kind of our take on it. And he's like, no, you have to change this. Like at this point, you're not just 2 years in, like you're 10 years in, you are getting a bit older. And he kind of forced me to make that change. But it took time to even like accept it myself. Like I knew that to be true, but at the same time, you're like, oh, but what about everyone else,
Yeah. Yeah. It fascinates me how we are so afraid, right? How we just walk around, and it's funny because you're talking about being younger with that title. I work with people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who are like, I can't call myself the president of this company. I'm like, but you are.
Yeah.
You're like, well, but that's ostentatious.
Yeah.
No, it's reality.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you really are the president of this company.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a bit of a strange thing. I do think looking back, it probably benefited us to some point based on our age and the meetings that we were having and stuff like that. But obviously it's just having that transition. And I remember when I did, someone send me like a congratulations on LinkedIn and be like, wow, that's quite the promotion. Like,
Right? Yes, it
you know,
was.
the feedback from people and all of that, right? So
Yeah, and owning that, I think, is also, we're talking about authenticity, is there's the ownership. So we've talked about transparency, vulnerability. I think there's ownership in for ourselves. Like, how do we own who we are, what we do, right? What's important to us? How do we own that for ourselves? What else comes up for the two of you in terms of like what's important if we're going to cultivate for ourselves and to help others cultivate this idea of authenticity?
I don't want people to confuse like authenticity with like being an asshole, right?
Oh, good God, no. Don't be an asshole.
Lack of discretion.
Right. And so that can happen sometimes, right? It's like, well, no, like this is really who I am. And I'm right. Like I'm this big jerk walking around or whatever that is. And it's like, but I'm just being authentic. I'm just being me. And it's like, I think, right. Like that's not what we're talking about.
No, it doesn't
right.
mean you don't respect people.
Exactly. And there's this, I think there's like this, we kind of talked around it a little bit, and it's kind of this making sure it's all like ecologically friendly, right? Like that when I'm authentic, I'm not stepping on anyone, I'm not hurting anyone else, I'm not leaving my footprint in the forest because I'm showing up in a certain way, right? We're talking about, when we talk about alignments and insides and outsides, we're also talking about like our outsides or other people's outsides too, right?
Yeah. So that shared environment, really, when you're talking about ecological friendliness. It's so funny because when you said that about not being an asshole, amen. Like if that is genuinely who you feel you are, if you feel like you are an asshole, then I guess be yourself, but own that you're an asshole. Like,
or maybe give
we
people
know
a
you are already.
disclaimer. Give people a disclaimer.
Yeah, well, it's just like, I think the reality is I don't want to think that somebody's an asshole and they're not.
Yeah.
If you're showing up as an asshole, like if that's who you are,
yeah,
fine. Then I know that that's who you are. And it is funny because Kim Scott's book Radical Candor came out, and that became the rallying call for assholes to be like, I'm just being radically candid.
Yeah.
Like, no. This
Yeah.
is not a reason to do that. Authenticity is about showing up those parts of us that we keep hidden because we feel like imposters, because we're afraid that if we do something, there's going to be some sort of ramification.
Yeah.
And so what we're really talking about is, how do you step into this place, this shared environment that Louise was just talking about, as much as yourself as possible, so you don't feel afraid and the other person can meet you as another human.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's also having that expectation outlined. Like one of the, tasks that I had when I first had a business coach was to outline our company values and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we actually find that, from one company to the next, usually people will stick there because their values are in alignment. So they can probably be authentic to a certain point. So, communication and passion, and there was this whole list of stuff. And it was all the stuff that you can see, like why you work well, maybe with one person or one client over another. And as an example, like how quick we are to communicate. And we'd find that we would just lose our minds when you're working with a client that can take a week to respond on something you really need, or a staff member or something like that. So you'd start to give preference and priority to the people that do communicate in the same way that you do and have respect for your time in the same way and stuff like that, as opposed to the people that seem flaky or they kind of are wishy-washy and come in and out and stuff like that. So you start to establish the people that you work well with together, whether it's a client or a staff member or a colleague or something like that. So they were to the point we even had the values like on our boardroom wall, like just as that constant reminder of what we're all about and the things that were important to us and stuff like that. And I found that whenever we would get frustrated is, whenever there was a values misalignment or something like that.
For sure. Well, you're using one of Louise's favorite words. I love values too and do a lot of values work with my clients, but Louise is like values.
Yeah.
We just don't spend enough time, right, on defining what that is for ourselves. Like we all know we have values,
Yeah.
right? Like some are inherent to who we are, but we just don't take enough time to put it down on paper, to really look at it, and to actually use it as a tool, right? Like you said, like businesses use it as a tool to
Yeah.
make sure they're moving in the right direction. As humans, as people, we can use that as a tool too, through
Yeah.
your career pivot, your change. If you feel like, right, you talk about being in alignment with your people, with your clients. Like if I don't know as an employee what my values are, and I'm having a crappy time at work and I'm frustrated constantly, well, like let's check yourself, right? Like let's find out your values, and where are you bumping up against the guardrails as you're moving forward. We just don't spend enough time talking about that because we're very flippant. Well, yeah, of course I have values, right? Like, yeah, I'm a decent human. Like,
But I
yeah.
think the sign that like you're not meshing properly is when you are frustrated, when you are stressful, and stuff like that, right? You can
Yeah.
see where there's things that aren't connecting properly. And the same could be said about family and relationships and stuff like that, right? If you
Yeah.
find that you're constantly getting frustrated with the same thing, then
Yeah.
that's probably a good example of what's happening.
Right. Well, and it's true in any relationship because we have those relationships with human beings, we have those relationships with businesses, we have those relationships with, food and sex and money and, drugs and alcohol. Like we use these things to kind of fix other parts of our relationships instead of, and so therefore we now have a new relationship that has to be managed. And so it when we do right size ourselves or put ourselves back on the path where we do know our values, we know what we're most devoted to in the world, then we have our GPS that we can move forward. We can set our intentions to show up around those things and therefore be our most authentic selves. And so while it is a buzzword out there, right? Be your most authentic self. There's actually some truth behind it in that, right? It's going to reduce our stress. We're going to be able to show up more happy in our work, in our lives. We're going to choose relationships that are healthy for us because we're in alignment. And so it's interesting to me that we keep coming back to this idea of alignment and authenticity.
Yeah, maybe you just can't have one without the other.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to know on that point, like, what are our takeaways from today's conversation? What are our golden nuggets?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd heard, I think it was like Dr. Phil, honestly, but he just says, once you acknowledge something, you can change it. So I think acknowledging what's important to you and, what it takes for you to be your best self and what those values mean for you, you can be more aware of what you need from the people that are in your lives and what you need maybe from your career or for the position that you're in and stuff like that. But if you're just kind of like walking into it blindly, you could find yourself in a company that you don't want to be a part of, or working in a job that you're not comfortable with or something like that. And, even as a realtor, a big thing for us is that we're bound by the code of ethics. And sometimes I'm always surprised to hear realtors get such a bad rap for being like greasy salespeople or this or that. And, I just think it undermines everything that the profession is supposed to stand for, which is really like looking out for a client's best interests, whatever that may be. Right. So I just, for me, I believe that you have to help people in whatever capacity that is. And if that means like, maybe they want this today, but 6 months from now is better for them, like you're just patient until that time is better, right? You don't try to talk them into something that isn't going to work for their family or their finances or something like that. And, I think you just have to instill in yourself what matters most to you and then live your life according to that.
Yeah, I love that code of ethics. It's almost like our time together today. We were talking about like your code of authentic you, like your code of authenticity, right? It is like a genetic code almost. And how are you putting that out into the world, right? And Serena, like through our whole time together today, you just being so authentic and sharing, right? Your journey and how you got to where you are and all of those things, right? And living those values, right? Making sure you were in alignment. And that was the first thing you said when we talked today was alignment. And I just think that was our thread throughout our whole conversation today. And yeah, I just love that. I love that whole idea of like your code of like authentic you or whatever that looks like. I'm not wordsmithy today. But right?
We all understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of this code of authenticity, and what to take it kind of a step further, right? Because we were talking about alignment and authenticity, and I couldn't agree with you more, Louise. Just Serena, what you've shared today, clearly being in alignment for yourself, but then also just showing up so authentically on this podcast, but also just in the world with the work that you're doing, with the book that you've written, and what you're sharing, and how you're sharing it with your clients. This code that we're talking about, this code of authenticity, is for us, and it's for us to help support other people
Mhm.
find their code of authenticity, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about some of those tools of using transparency and vulnerability and ownership and this shared ecosystem that we're in, so that we can start to develop these codes for ourselves, but we can share our code with others
Yeah.
to encourage them to be their most authentic selves as well.
Yeah.
Beautiful conversation. Serena, where can people find you? We do have all the links and all the places, but do you want to just kind of share where people can find you, and if you have anything that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, for sure. So for anything related to my book, and now that I'm a year and a half, I guess, since it's come out almost, now I share things more regarding like inspiration and motivation and other things. But I have an Instagram handle at Serena Holmes author. And then for everything pertaining to real estate, and I don't just focus on like listings, it's literally anything and everything to do with the home. So home is where we eat, sleep, relax, and play. So you can often see things focused around that, along with all the stats and news and stuff like that at Serena Holmes Realtor.
Fantastic. And again, I always point the wrong way, but it's wherever the text is on this.
It's pretty much the same across all social platforms.
I know it's usually down below, but if you're also listening, I don't know where it is on your listening. So
in the notes.
It's in the notes. So we are excited. Next week we are going to. Was that Charlie?
Yeah, he just woke up.
Charlie, you're late today.
My daughter's not here.
Oh, is that your daughter's name?
No. I just heard the sounds in the background.
Oh, it's Charlie. Charlie is Louise's cat.
Oh.
It's actually not Louise's cat. It's Louise's dog's cat.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, all right. So he's gonna join us while I talk about what we're talking about next week. Hi, Charlie. Next week, we're going to be talking about creating a plan to move forward. We're going to be joined by our guest, Sabrina Lindner, and that will be Friday, January 12th at our normal time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Figure out your time zone from there. And if you are interested in joining and having more conversations like this and actually being a part of them, join us over on the collective at yourkickasscareer.com, because we would love to have you as part of a juicy conversation.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Serena.
So much, Serena.
We're so glad you were here. And for those of you listening, we're so glad that you were here too, and that you decided to spend about a 45-minute time to join us for another kick-ass conversation. All right. Any last words?
No.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
You're welcome. Bye for now.
Bye.